So now with that, I'm going to turn things over to Lynn.
I chose this one because it was used most Women's Ministry Council. And in the mid-'80s, the first female speaker spoke at camp. Now there was a big gap between when the next one did. And then this is really fascinating. I started calling different men around the country and just kind of asked them, when do you remember hearing your first female speaker at Young Life? And the most common answer I got, and I asked Chris, when was the first time you think?
I said definitely was not in the 90s, and I said not until Gail became the original prayer. That's what
the majority of people seasoned in the ministry, men around the country, it was in the mid to late 90s before they were on they experienced a female speaker at camp. That's not that long ago. It's not that long ago. In 1986, Nancy Warden was hired as the first female RD. In 2001, Gail Merrick-Ebersol was hired as the first SVP in this division, the Midwest division. Now I will say, she was fired, okay? And we didn't have another female SVP until 2 years ago with Lindsay Cashel. But about the same time, one of the few female RDs was let go as well, Dawn Finch, because in both cases it was kind of to do it a different way. They were doing things a different way. And that's in my opinion. I said some of this would be in my opinion. I wanted to share a little bit about my story in Young Life because it was interesting listening to Kristen's history of women because my history with Young Life is kind of all over the place. And I could relate to a lot of the things you said. But the reason I had Gail Ebersol there, she was very significant for me in Young Life. But I want to start from the beginning. In 1986 to 1999, I did not work for Young Life. I was a volunteer for Young Life. But I worked in the public sector. I was a case worker at Pine Rest Christian Mental Health Services. I was a case manager of a group home there for about 13 years. And it was an all-girls group home. And I also volunteered for Young Life at South Christian High School. So two different sets of people that I got to work with, okay? Some were very strong Christian background, but privileged, not so much on the other side, okay? And so navigating those two places, God did some pretty significant work in me. Black and white did no longer work, okay? God introduced the gray to me, both of life, but also of theology, the gospel, and that there's room for all of it there, which is a pretty beautiful thing. Fast forward to 1999, I started working for Young Life. And this is where things got interesting. I basically started working for Young Life because they couldn't find anybody. At the time, Grand Rapids was one of the biggest areas in the country, I believe. I had led the Young Life with Steve Winkle at South Christian for quite a while. And then I went to be on committee and helped Chris start Young Life in Eastern Ottawa. But then I came on Young Life staff mostly because they were dividing up Grand Rapids and they didn't have somebody, I didn't think, identified for the part of the city where I live. And I said, okay, well, I'll do it for a year until you find somebody. But there were some pretty great men in my life that kept saying, no, I think you're called to this. I think you're called to this. Steve Winkle being one of them. Chris, of course, is positive about everything and everyone. And of course, I was called to this. And my husband said, no, I think you're being called to this. And Rick Becker, our committee chair, said, Lynn, I think you're being called to this. And I just said, no, I don't think that's true. And it wasn't until sometime later that I realized I was called. But I say all this because I think for women, oftentimes we need people around us to point out what they see in us in order for us to have a vision for the call. And I say that to the men in the room. Everybody I said to you that said, no, I think you're being called to this, and here's why. They're all men, right? At that time in history, I needed to hear that from other men. And my call, I started to live into a call, but I couldn't have named it as the call right then. Okay? Is there anybody in here that can relate to that? Okay. Yeah. Any women in here that can relate to that? Yeah. That's the majority of women I talk to. So when I go to Young Life trainings and they have you share your call, I'm just like, I felt like I got it wrong for a lot of years because I didn't know what that meant when I started working in ministry. It wasn't until I worked in ministry that I recognized God's call in my life. Okay? And the other reason that that's important is I was raised in a very traditional family. I was raised in the Christian Reformed Church. My mom and dad had very specific gender roles. However, there was one difference. My mom was a working mom. She was an administrator. She was a nurse and administrator in hospital. My parents were both the first, I believe, college educated in their families. But I watched my mom work really hard in her gender role. She's a phenomenal cook, still is to this day. She sewed all my clothes. She was PTA president, and she worked full time. Okay, and I didn't think there was anything amiss with that until I was in high school and started to go to a friend's house, and I heard the remarks that the non-working moms made about my mom, and that was when I started recognizing in this Christian suburb, there's maybe something off here with my mom working, and I didn't quite know what to do with that until I became a working mom, and I recognized, oh, this is what was going on there. Because I'm feeling that too. So I was raised by a very hardworking mom who often sacrificed herself in the context of working both for her family, but also outside the home. It's quite remarkable to me. I've only realized the last few years how that's impacted my own self-care and things like that because I've tried to mimic how she raised me. How many of you can relate to anything of that? Okay. West Michigan, that's pretty easy to relate to. But then when I started working for Young Life, I had a little bit of culture shock around ministry. Okay? So I worked in the public sector, I testified in court cases, I did all these things in my job at Pine Rest, and all of a sudden I was in ministry where my ideas, I waited to be asked for them because I saw the cues. Right? I read the cues and I played the game because that's what you do in ministry. You put the kids and the mission over who you are, right? The cause is more important than the platform or the title, right? And I recognized very quickly that that's the game that you have to play, is that, oh no, these kids are worth it, so I have to figure out every way to express this that won't get me in trouble or them in trouble. And so what happens is I developed strong influence skills. Because I knew that if I used my voice too authoritatively, that things wouldn't move the way I thought they needed to move on behalf of the kids I serve. Which, that sounds manipulative, doesn't it? I developed manipulative skills. Yeah, definitely. Because I recognize I have leadership skills. Okay? I definitely have leadership skills. But I also knew that these kids were more important. Them knowing Christ, that I was willing to stifle that to get that ahead. Which you see that all the time in Christian world. I remember as a Young Life, when I was area director, I would show up. You know, do they still have these youth pastor meetings in different parts of town? Yeah. So so in our area, there were 3 of those. And I was told that if I didn't show up at those, they were only going to bash Young Life. So if I didn't show up at them, they're going to bash Young Life. So I started going to these. How much time does that take? It takes a ton of time, right? And at the time, I was the only female. Okay? So the joke was, oh, Lynn's here, great, she can bring snack. Or Lynn's coming, Lynn, would you take notes, right? And I did that stuff. I did it because that was the game I had to play to represent the kids that I really cared about, okay? And I confess that, is that I shouldn't have done that, but I also confess that I had to, okay? It's a double-edged sword, and I see a lot of head shaking right now. So I'm recognizing that some of you know what I'm talking about, right? Okay? We played that game. I want to share with you a little bit further is that as I worked my way out of the job, because I had great people like Eric come up, I started working at the divisional level, and now I'm at the national level with Young Life. And the reality was that got more exaggerated the different circles I got in the context of Young Life. It didn't get easier, is what I'm trying to say. I had to use those skills that I had learned as an area director in the context of workplace. And where I saw that the most was in the context of pay. When I left my area job and they replaced me, I found out through some supportive folks on our committee that I was grossly underpaid as area director. That I was hired in, even though I had 13 years of work experience at the same level that the people graduating right from college did, those gentlemen were paid more than I was because I was a second income, and even though I had more experience. I did not know that. How would I know that? As I moved into my divisional role, once again, they paid attention to what other folks in other divisions were making in the context of what I did, and that got adjusted again, okay? As I got to a national role, I found out the same thing. What I was getting paid in the context, and it got changed again. It wasn't until the last 3 years that I've been equitably paid, I've been told. And so, I will assure you of this, equitable pay is now on the boards everywhere in the context of Young Life. You don't have to worry about that. We have an HR and a president who's very passionate about this, and I feel the most encouraged I've ever felt. In fact, I never thought I'd feel this encouraged in the context of being a woman in ministry in my lifetime in Young Life. So I want to kind of end right there. But I want to say that has been in the context of where we are now. But does that mean that all of the SAC folks around the country are in that same place as where our president has a vision of going? It does not, okay? And I want to talk about that a little bit. In the history of, and get some kind of broad strokes here, and this is where I could use your help on language, because we don't really talk about this. We don't really talk about it this way, and I'm being kind of vulnerable with you. These are just some words that I observed as I was interviewing some people, but some existing postures toward women in Young Life. And I would like to say that they existed in the past, but they still exist today. And I'm going to give you these two postures. One is practical and pragmatic, okay? So it's very practical. Yes, we need women leaders because we have girls in our high schools, right? It's very pragmatic. Yes, we need girl leaders. Yes, we need women leaders. Yes, I guess we need women on our staff in our area because, yeah, we want to reach more kids. We have this goal, right? It's just very practical, pragmatic approach. And then Bob Mitchell introduced this theological approach. So this is just right, okay? This is just the right thing to do. And what is happening, and I wonder if this could be considered in the cultural context of the ministry too, but I think what is happening is in Young Life is that as we have now leadership that is saying, this is our theology and we're sticking to it and we're not going backwards anymore, that the practical and the pragmatic doesn't fly anymore. So some of those folks are getting nervous in the context of ministry. Some of them are confused.